Welcome to the PHLY Sixers weekly stock up, stock down weekly report here, presented by
our good friends at Bagels & Co., the home of huge Brooklyn-style bagels made right here in Philadelphia. If you want to find the closest Bagels & Co. near you, I need you to head over immediately, well, maybe after the segment, but definitely very soon, to www.thebagelsandco.com/store-locator to find the closest Bagels & Co. near you, where they offer 15 to 20 types of bagels and over 30 different flavors of cream cheese at all their locations in the Philadelphia area.
And if you bring us one, each of us, you have to bring 4. Stock up for you. Derek Bodner, Kyle Newbeck, I'm Devon Givens.
Stock up on bagels.
Stock up right there. Brianna is producing. We have our weekly stock report. We have to get into this one. Folks, we're not going Sixers. We always do Sixers. We want to mix in National Basketball Association. Stock up, stock down. Let's start off with a bang. Guys, Ben Simmons.
Oh,
They don't know who I'm throwing at them, folks. We got to go Ben Simmons.
I know which sign Derek has, and you better pull it out immediately.
Down for the rest of the season with the back injury again. This is after they told us they were giving us an update of we're still evaluating in about a week or two. The Brooklyn Nets, stock up, stock down Ben Simmons.
Here's what I'll say, though, and this might be the most controversial take given the audience we're talking to. I feel bad for him. I don't wish injury on anyone. I know Ben Simmons is frustrating. I know that he might have ended up ruining the process. I get all of that. He was aloof. He didn't improve on things he needed to improve upon. All of these things, I feel bad for him. I don't wish injury on anyone. He has gone through a lot here ever since leaving Philadelphia. Sure, he's made a lot of money. Sure, he's let you down in big ways. But I still don't wish injury on anyone, so I feel bad for him.
Kyle, 15 games played on the season. 6.1 points per game, 7.9 rebounds, and 5.7 assists in those 15 games, 12 of which he started, playing 24 minutes a contest for the Brooklyn Nets.
He makes Bonnie and Clyde look like a charitable organization, is what I would say. He is one of the all-time thieves in the history of professional sports. To Derek's point, on the health front, I do feel like I've had many strong stances on Ben Simmons over the years. None of them were like, oh, he's a coward or he doesn't play through pain, any of that. Like, his body has clearly failed him in many ways over the last few years. And that's not something that, like, I will never sit here and criticize a guy for not being able to stay healthy. Like, you can't control that. And I would say that if you look at Ben's overall conditioning throughout the years, that's something that he's tried to control. Great. Like, he's great, in great physical shape, great conditioning for most of his career. And I think you've seen, as he's lost some of his athleticism as a result of these injuries, it's had a very real impact on his game. Like, we can get into the mental side and all that. Like, to me, the biggest thing that has leapt out about him is that he is not that good of a defender anymore. He's someone that commits a lot of silly reach-in fouls. He's undisciplined. And, like, the best thing about his defensive ability in Philadelphia was not necessarily creating steals and jumping passing lanes and being aggressive. It was defending guys and playing great one-on-one defense without fouling and slowing down great players. Like, that is gone. He's not able to do that. Teams are picking on him at times. And then you add on, like, clearly that Hawks series and that Game 7, that Trae Young moment, was a watershed moment in his career that he has never come back from. I will say, I feel much worse for the Brooklyn fans who I've watched go through the accelerated process with him that Sixers fans went through in Philadelphia. Because every offseason you see there's Ben, there's an Instagram post, there's some jump shots. Here he comes, Simo the Savage.
Delusional.
He arrived there and was like, oh my God, Ben Simmons and shooters. He gets to play with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and so on and so forth.
Put him at the 5, let him cook.
The guy has never been who people have wanted him to be. Some of the reason for that in the last few years has not been within his control, but the things that are within his control, he has failed on over and over and over again. And I think it was hard to say at the time, right? Like he's a confident guy, and to some degree, you need to be confident to the point of delusion in the NBA and in pro sports to succeed. I think the number one thing that has held him back is an inability or maybe unwillingness, it's hard to say, to look in the mirror and say, I need to change this, this, and this in order to go from who I am now to who I need to be to sustain this career and be the great player that I think I am. No one has been able to get through to him in that way. And so this far into his career, he is the same guy, but worse than he was when he entered the league.
I'm one of those Brooklyn people who has had to watch this since last season at the trade deadline and certainly this year. I even had someone ask me, they were talking about their fantasy team at the beginning of the year. And they were like, what do you think about Ben Simmons, honestly? Because, of course, paying attention to the Brooklyn Nets. And I'm like, no, don't do it. Because if you're really trying to win your league, you cannot really put a high pick on this guy because it's unclear of who he's going to be. And now these injuries have really taken over. And sure, there may be some other aspects to it that have contributed still to what is happening right now with him to only play that amount of games in 60-plus games already this season. It's bad. And watching it, though, and then hearing some of the comments from him and what he feels like he can be, he was upset that he was coming off the bench. He felt like he was a starter and all that stuff. And it's like, it's the same guy as you just said.
What's that meme of that guy in the supermarket? You're not that guy, pal.
You're
not that guy.
Yeah, because you haven't shown that. And then from a fan standpoint, they don't know what we already know. But me knowing and watching and, of course, rooting for Brooklyn in a different way, you understand if he was playing what he did as the All-Star and the All-NBA player, Defensive Player of the Year candidate that he was here, how much he can help that Brooklyn Nets team. Instead, it's just been a wash for him as a part of the Brooklyn Nets, and that's why we had to mention Ben Simmons, stock up, stock down. A lot of that is not his fault for the stock being down, but it's an NBA story. Stock down for Ben Simmons. Next, how about the Western Conference leading 43-19 Minnesota Timberwolves?
We go back to Derek.
Got the news that Karl Anthony Towns potentially out for the remainder of the season with a torn meniscus. And where that is, stock down.
If there is any team in a league that we can feel some sympathy and camaraderie with, it's ones that are dealing with a big man and a torn meniscus. But that is a tough one to get through. That being said, Minnesota is a team that is largely built on the backs of their defense. Obviously, they're still going to be okay on that end. But that is we still don't know if he's going to miss time, how much time he's going to miss, if he's out for the rest of the regular season, yada, yada, yada. But they were talk about a great story and a resurgent year. 43-19 tied with the Oklahoma City Thunder at the top of the Western Conference, trailing only Boston in the NBA. They were having for them, a real magical season. And you hate to have that news. Hate it.
Yeah. And so, look, you could make the argument that maybe they can not even tread water. I still think they can be pretty good, right? Like Ant as the
if he
primary
can come
creator
back for the playoffs, they can tread water for sure.
You run lots of pick and rolls with him and Gobert, and they got tons of good wing athletes and what have you. I do think, though, that Cat, for all the problems that I have with him, I shouldn't say never. I was an early college Cat believer, and then once he
for sure
showed his flaws in the NBA, that ship sailed for me. He is a big offensive driver of that team. Like if you look at the underlyings there, without him, and really the minutes that become a problem, whenever Anthony Edwards sits, they are going to be in big trouble. They do not have the offensive talent
close to Towns.
Now look, Mike Conley, good caretaker, game manager type point guard. He will certainly help to steer them through this. They'll figure some things out. I really like McDaniels. Kyle Anderson will maybe step into more of a creator role, and he's been able to be impactful at times. But when you have a 7-foot guy who you can put on the floor and expect to make and take a ton of threes and open the floor up, those guys like McDaniels, who are not necessarily high-level creators, but are decent slashers, decent cutters, all of that takes options off the table for those guys. So I think there's going to be some problems over the next few weeks at least, and that could go from, look, they're neck and neck battling with OKC for that top seed. I think this is OKC's opportunity to say, we're taking the number 1 seed outright, and we're not giving it back.
To your point, their offense gets 7 points per 100 possessions worse when he is on the bench. Their defense gets about 4 per 100 better when he's on the bench. So their strength will arguably get stronger because Towns has never been a good defender. But offensively, it is going to be hard for him to be competent for all the reasons. His individual scoring, his floor spacing. It is a tough loss for sure.
There was a game against the Clippers over the last week where they lost by 2 points. It was a defensive type of game. Not a lot of points in that one. I think it was 90-88 was the final score. It was that low of a scoring game. The point that I'm bringing up when Kyle mentions Mike Conley and the lack of offense that they have outside of Towns and certainly Edwards is that Mike Conley, 2-year contract extension, he's got that over the last couple of weeks, struggled mightily in that game. And as he did, Monte Morris did come in and pick up a lot of the slack, but they still only had 88 points. And that's where the problem is going to be. Who is going to be that player to come in and score the basketball? Nickeil Alexander-Walker is not that type of player to put up those types of points. Jaden McDaniels, of course, maybe he can elevate his offensive production a little bit. We know who Rudy Gobert is. This is going to be something to watch if he can come back, Towns, by the postseason, but certainly as they wind down the regular season, this is going to be a very interesting one to continue to monitor. As we talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder, I wanted to combine this one to see what you guys thought because I think I know where you guys are going to go, but I'm going to go with Chet Holmgren versus Victor Wembanyama.
Oh, well, how do we
stock up, stock down?
I don't know how to do stock up or stock down on that one. I think they're both great.
It's more the rivalry of those two guys going against each other and what we see when they face off.
I would say this: stock up on the rivalry, but I think it's going to be a very one-sided individual rivalry. I think Victor's been kicking his ass on an individual level for quite a while. I think the good thing for Chet is he has a much better team around him right now.
Yeah.
And
he will probably have a much better team around him for most of his career because that team is set up in a way that is unique.
Yeah. So San Antonio's got a lot of work to do. I do think the interesting thing about watching Wemby, and there's been, who was it? Ramona Shelburne on ESPN got in some hot water this week because she was like, Victor's not going to be happy to not be competing for very long. It's like, all right, I get it, but it's also his first fucking season. Yeah. Like, everybody can chill out. And there are many, many examples of teams trying to go for it too early and ultimately using too many draft picks and getting rid of talent that they shouldn't have. Great recent example was Anthony Davis in New Orleans. They tried to accelerate the timeline. They bring in Drew Holiday, and they top out as a second-round team, despite the fact that was, for my money, that's the best Anthony Davis has ever been, was in New Orleans. He won a title in LA, but I don't think was as good of an individual player, just happened to be playing with LeBron. So all that to say, Wemby in all these individual matchups with, I'd say, some of the future bigs, so Chet Holmgren, there was Şengün, guys like that, he has these moments where it's like, he doesn't even look like he's playing the same sport as these guys. And once he gets a real team around him, it's going to be a different story. But here's what I would say about Chet. I've been a big fan of his this season, what I've seen from him. He very much seems like a guy who is about the right things, right? Like, he's buying into whatever he needs to do on a night-to-night basis. If he has to get fucking bodied by the opposing center and he's playing full-time center against a guy who he really shouldn't be, he's okay with it if it's sold to him by Mark Daigneault, like, that's the best thing for the team. If he's got to take 6 or 7 threes in a game and space the floor, open it up for Jalen Williams, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the rest of the gang, like, he does it. And I just think the versatility that he's shown and the willingness to buy in and do what it takes, he's certainly not the primary driver of success, but I think it's no accident that his ascension, or just him playing, I should say, this year versus not playing last year, has taken them from fringe playoff team to a real deal, like, number 1 seed contender in the West.
I think they're both probably, as much as there might be some concern about Wemby being on a bad team for a while, they're both probably in the right spot. I think Wemby makes more sense as a focal point of a rebuild, And, there was a lot of talk, including from us, of, well, how efficient can he really be as a, sort of like that unique body type in a situation where there's not really many of the dribbly types of guards to create opportunities for him. Well, over the last 30 games, he's dropping like 23 per night on a 62% true shooting or something like that. He's
in limited minutes.
In relatively limited minutes, and with a team that's not really built to play off of him all that well, and he's still found a way to be efficient. He is a guy who I think is going to grow into a real legitimate focal point, and that's going to be fun to watch. And Chet is if you were asking one of them to step in and be like a high-level 2 or 3 option on a team and just do exactly what you need him to do, he's probably the right player to fill that role as well. They're both in the right spot. That's going to be a great rivalry for a long time. Okay, I'm just so jealous of OKC. I'm just so jealous of what they've been able to build and how the league has gotten out of their way and let them do their thing. No direct correlation with anything that we might have witnessed. They are going to be just a wealth of resources and avenues they can go going forward.
And by the way, I think people have finally figured it out. Jalen Williams is fucking
they have their top
awesome.
3. Yeah.
He is
the real
awesome.
deal. The real deal. All right, we have time for one more here on the Sixers Stock Report, the NBA edition of the Stock Up, Stock Down. Have you guys, before I ask this one, have you guys paid attention to the, I guess, local high school basketball game that was a problem?
Oh, man.
Okay.
Yes, I did.
So let's get to it. The NJSIAA officials in the Camden Manasquin, I don't know how to pronounce it. My apologies, because you've had a bad week. But the officials calling the game, 2 seconds
You're talking
remaining.
about when there was they
half
called
a second
it
left
dead
and it's out of his hands.
And the guy makes the shot to after
I know
Camden
where
makes
this
the
one's
free
going.
throws, and they counted the bucket
sideways.
They counted the bucket.
There you go.
Look,
And then they gathered at the end and took the bucket away. And from my understanding, I reached out to somebody who was a coach in New Jersey, said they are not allowed to look at any video. They have to go off of what they called and what they converse about. And they decided no basket, Camden wins.
Can you imagine sitting there,
Stock all the way the hell down.
having the video and going, no, we're not allowed to use that in our consideration. It doesn't count, even though we all freaking know it went in time.
That
That's
was
wild.
awful.
So
Awful.
here's where I'm going to go with this. I think it's a disgrace that Camden won that game, right? I also think it's a disgrace at the state level that after that comes out, I know the officials can't use the footage at the game. It seems like a very common sense. Like this was not, people are trying to argue, well, there are calls blown during games or whatever. You have to go through every, this is literally, we can see it happened. The game would have ended immediately.
Yes.
There's a direct cause and effect. This play changed the outcome of the game. At the state level,
Yes.
that's an easy one to make an exception and say, they got it wrong. It's clearly wrong. The team who ended up being the winner of the game, we should just rule that they lost and whatever. But I'll take it a step further. Malik Waynes is the coach of that team in Camden,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
If the goal,
about
like,
That is like, I was
night.
going to say, that's the second mention
We
on this
talked
show
about it
this
last
week.
night, yeah.
if the goal of high school basketball broadly is like, look, most of these guys, there are a lot of very good players in that program. There's a reason that they were all trying to push for that. Like those guys care, they're super competitive, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If the reason for high school basketball is predominantly to prepare kids for life and their futures, Malik Waynes should have seen what happened and said, they fucking won the game. We didn't. And take a stand as like a sportsman and a leader and a head coach and say, we lost. Like you can be the
This
bigger
is not
man.
how we want to win.
We don't want to win this way. We will not represent the state in the game after this. Like, I think that I don't want to say that there's a responsibility. Like, I'm more angry at the state for not allowing those kids to have a moment that they earned. Like, they won that game for all intents and purposes. All I'm saying is it would have meant something to me. It would have shown me a lot if Malik had said, we don't accept that we're the winners. And from what we could tell, it seems like the opposite happened where the coaches were harassing the officials and they actually overturned it. I don't know if that's a cause and effect, but I didn't appreciate that at all. So It's a shame that happened.
You remember that commercial? What was that commercial where the guy tipped the ball out of bounds?
Yes, and he told the refs.
And he was sitting there pondering with himself, and in the huddle, he's like, Coach, I hit it. It's not our ball. That kind of thing. Here's my thing, too, because we know about the rules like in the NFL and baseball and basketball and certain things where the officials called it a good basket. So as the officials are gathering, what was the overwhelming evidence to the naked eye where you called it a basket to then say, two of us are saying,
and by the way,
I'm
the
overturning
crew chief
this.
was the guy who said it was good.
It was a good basket to overturn this. That's my thing. What was it? You don't have, all right, you're not looking at the video. So what are the other two saying to tell the crew chief who said it was good for whatever vantage point that he had to say that it was not a good basket, game over, Camden wins? What was it? What was it? And why are they not speaking? And why are the rules not different, at least for the playoffs, where you're talking about at the state level, should we be able to look at video for something like this in a spot this huge for the postseason, for the state, for the right for a state championship, and what we just witnessed? That was disgraceful. That was despicable. That was awful.
Stock way down.
Stock way down for that group of officiating there. And then again, we're Thursday and we haven't heard anything else since that basketball game took place. And that's really bad. So we had to end on that one. See, this is why these guys are the best. They didn't know what I was bringing, but I brought some stuff, and especially with the officials.
Every day that we got on this show, I have no idea what you're bringing, but that's why I love you.
Hey, this is why I'm here. This is why this is the official Sixers Stock Report. We appreciate everybody for tuning in on a weekly basis.
And
we had to bring the New Jersey
our good
edition.
Friends at Bagels & Co.
Yes.
Sponsoring the segment.
We had to bring the NBA edition, and these guys brought it. We appreciate it for Derek and Kyle and Devon, and for Brianna as well. We appreciate you tuning in every week. We'll talk to you next week.
We all silly like the mayor.